so happy to be joined by Emma and Bridget today for our chat. They're going to start us off an introduction to themselves and their books, and we'll let Emma go first, Bridget, because she's been on with us before.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Kaz, for having Bridget and I to chat. I'm Emma Stiles. I'm the author of No Country for Girls, which has recently come out in paperback. I write contemporary Australian noir about young women taking on the patriarchy. And No Country for Girls is a pacey, high-stakes road trip thriller about two teen girls, Charlie and Nao, who take off along 2,000 kilometres of remote highway in Western Australia. It's been described as Thelma and Louise meets The Tourist, and it's my love letter to road movies, high-octane thrillers, and the West Australian outback. And it's currently on 2 different award shortlists, which I'm very happy about. And we're chatting to Bridget.
Hi guys, I'm Bridget Walsh. I'm the author of The Tumbling Girl, which is not set in Australia at all, not even remotely. So my novel is set in Victorian London in 1876. It's a crime novel, obviously, and it centres around a somewhat down at heel music hall called the Variety Palace, and it features a somewhat feisty, independent woman who works at the Variety Palace, who insinuates herself into a crime investigation into the murder of her best friend. It hasn't been shortlisted for anything. It has only been out 3 weeks, so I remain hopeful.
It's a great read. It's an absolutely brilliantly plotted and written book.
I was just going to say they are both excellent reads. So if it's not been nominated for anything, it will slowly get there.
It's early days, for sure.
Yeah, early days, because it's a really good read.
Oh, thank you, Kaz. That's really good. And Emma. So, and I would say right back at you, Emma, No Country for Girls is great. If you haven't read it, you must go out and get a copy because it's fantastic.
You must, although there are the odd moment where you're like,
oh yeah,
there's quite a few moments like that, aren't there?
There is.
Totally. There are lots of moments with Emma's book where you do this really good kind of curtain line thing at the end of chapters where I thought, oh, I didn't know that you were going to tell me that then, and now I have to read another chapter even though I'm tired and I want to go to sleep. So it's a real skill being able to do that, and Emma's got it down pat, I have to say.
Oh, thank you.
Now in our promo that we made, you said that the connection you thought between your books was the feisty women that are the kind of key characters. Introduce us to those characters. Tell us a bit more about them.
Sure. My 2 girls, I mean, there are the No Country for Girls is written from 3 different points of view, but the 2 protagonists are Charlie and Nao, and they are each written in the first person. Charlie and Nao are 2 young women who are not powerful in their lives, which is definitely an enduring theme for me to write about young women finding and stepping into their power in some way. So these are 2 young women. They don't know each other at the start of the book. They don't like each other. They certainly don't trust each other. But they're thrown together when Nao shows up on Charlie's doorstep one night. She's clearly running from something. In the meantime, Charlie has stolen a gold bar from her sister's boyfriend, Daryl. And when Daryl shows up and wants it back, there is a confrontation which escalates and ultimately leaves Daryl dead on Charlie's kitchen floor. And then these 2 young women go on the run in Daryl's Holden Rodeo twin cab ute, as you do. And they find quite quickly that, in fact, there is a whole bag of these stolen gold bars stashed under the passenger seat. So it's definitely, it's, you know, there's a bit of a homage to Thelma and Louise, which was a film that had such a huge impression, made such a huge impression on me when I saw it 32 years ago. And also No Country for Old Men, which was such a great book and brilliant film. So it's got a little bit of those influences in it. But the two characters, honestly, these two characters, because Bridget and I both did the same course, the crime fiction course at the University of East Anglia, and I went on that course planning to write a totally different book. And then within 2 weeks, we had done this writing exercise, and these two characters just appeared to me in this writing exercise, almost fully formed. And I knew I had to give them a whole book, because they just, like I said, they started arguing in my head and they didn't stop. And that was a gift to me. Like, it felt like, I'm not saying it was easy, but honestly, a lot of the time it felt like those two wrote the book for me. And I kind of just had to point them. Like, I knew once I knew geographically where they were going, I just pointed them, and then things happened. You know, shit happened on the road, basically. Anyway, that gives you a bit of an idea. I'll let Bridget tell us about.
So my feisty female is Minnie Ward, who is a song and sketch writer for the Variety Palace Music Hall. She used to be a performer, but something happened in her past which meant she got crippling stage fright. You do find out in the novel what happened. And she's the novel is set in 1876, but Minnie, I wanted to write a working class heroine, but I wanted her to have agency, and I wanted her to move through her world confidently. That really mattered to me. And weirdly enough, Emma saying about what she started off thinking she was going to write on the UEA course. When the first piece of this novel that I wrote, Minnie and her kind of detective sidekick were married, and she barely spoke a word in the first chapter. And I remember my tutor saying, whose story is it? Is it Minnie or Albert's? And I said, well, it's Minnie's story, obviously. And he said, well, you know, you're not making her the center of it. So I kind of decided to turn things around a bit and make it that her and Albert haven't yet met at the start of the novel. So she's kind of fearless. She's, you know, she's a working class girl who technically there's lots of places she can't go in Victorian London. There's lots of things she can't do, but she doesn't care about any of that. She just thinks, I can do what I like. I can go where I want. It does lead her into some pickles, I have to say. But she is, I mean, it's really interesting, Emma, you saying that about your characters as well, that I feel it sounds kind of a bit whimsical to say I don't think I write Minnie, but I don't feel like that. I feel like I kind of turn up at the computer and she's just sitting there, you know, tapping her fingers, waiting for me to turn up, and she kind of takes off. So I love writing her, and I'm incredibly fond of her as a character. I just want to see where she's going to take me, really.
Before we go on, and I'm going to ask you some more questions, we've got some hellos from Sarah, Laura, and Michelle Mackenzie. Remember, if you're watching, and Sam as well, if you're watching, you need to be asking questions, because that's
so you can win a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can win a book, and all questions count.
I love that, Bridget, what you said about Minnie, and I'm quite envious that you are writing a series, because I just think that is exciting to see where that character takes you and what's going to happen next. And you know, I went back to, because I grew up in Western Australia, and that's everything I write is set there. I was back there over the last Australian summer, and I met with quite a lot of book clubs in and around Perth, which is where the action in the story starts. And people loved the fact that it was so local. And a few people asked me things like, "Oh, would you write a sequel? Are you going to write another book with these characters?" And I was kind of saying, "Well, not at the moment. I'm writing another standalone thriller." But I had one woman at one of the book clubs said to me, "No, Emma, these characters are done. You have put them through enough."
Wow.
And I just thought that was so lovely, how invested people are in these two. So yeah, they're having a bit of a breather at the moment.
That is the great thing, though. It's like when somebody reads your book, somebody who doesn't know you, I mean, your friends and family are, you know, basically they've got to say nice things. But when somebody who doesn't know you says something lovely about the book and really kind of taps into what you were trying to do. And this book had quite a long journey to getting published. It went out just before we went into the first lockdown, and it took a long time. And in that time, I kept thinking, okay, this isn't going to happen. I'm going to write something else. And I tried writing a sort of prequel, and I tried writing something set in the present day. But these characters just said, no, we've got a lot more mileage. There's a lot more we want to say. And I have huge admiration for anyone who writes a series of standalones, because the thought of starting again with a whole new bunch of characters would be really tough. But then with Charlie and Nao, you kind of think, no, that I could see you coming back to them, but in a sense their story does feel complete. You know, they reach an understanding of who they are. We kind of understand everything that's happened to them, why they've done the things they've done. And you don't want to think, oh, I'll just write a second one because this one's done well. Their story does feel total in itself, I think, is my feeling.
Do you not feel like set up for more shenanigans, though?
Sorry, Tess?
I don't think they're going to settle down to a calm, happy life after, do you?
No.
Not feel like there's going to be some shenanigans afterwards.
I could imagine where I would send them and what would happen. But yes, you know, might may or may not happen. But I do have a lot of ideas for different standalones that don't involve those two. So I'm kind of I'm finally enjoying some momentum writing another one. So that's nice. That's a great.
That's good.
Really great.
So before we go on to the many questions we now have on the things, they are coming up as we're going.
Good.
Now, what can you tell us about book 2? Because I'm presuming you're both working on book 2. We know that Emma's is probably going to be completely different.
I've written
carry on.
I've written book 2, and it's coming out in March next year. So book 2 is it's Minnie and Albert's very different case. So there are a lot of returning characters, but there's lots of new characters, which is the thing I really like about a series. And because I said it in a music hall, there's kind of almost endless potential to bring people in. So at the start of the book, Minnie is running the Variety Palace after events towards the end of The Tumbling Girl. She's not doing it very well. She's actually quite inept at running a musical, as she discovers fairly quickly. And she's kind of hiding herself away from the world a little bit. What happened in The Tumbling Girl is quite traumatic elements of it. And so she's finding it difficult to deal with that. And then she realizes fairly early on that hiding herself away is not the answer, that she has to embrace the world and all its perils. So yeah, I mean, I really hope people react to it in the way they're reacting to The Tumbling Girl. It's always kind of weird though, because you write a book and you're thinking it's this book, this is the one, and then having written a second one, now I've got all this anxiety about, oh my God, what if people don't like it as much as they like the first one? And I've also written the third, and I'm currently editing that at the moment. So I can't stop. This is my favourite thing. I can't believe my luck that I get to do this. And people seem to like it, and that's amazing. But I know, Emma, yours is different. I'm really keen to learn what you're doing with the second one.
Well, I have serious book 2 and 3 envy, Bridget.
Oh.
I have to get that out of the way. But yes, I'm in a much better place with it now. I think I started trying to write book 2 much too early, when I had not got Charlie and Nao out of my head. And like you have said, Bridget, which I love, how much you love Minnie. And I love these characters too so much. And I read an interview with Lee Child a few years ago where he was talking about Reacher, and he was like, you can't love your main character too much. You've got to hold them at arm's length. And I was thinking, well, I knew I wasn't doing that, but I just couldn't really help it. I don't think I will ever love characters the same way I have loved and do love Charlie and Nao. They will always have a very special place in my heart, which is great, which is, I kind of think, as it should be. But I am at last finally excited about book 2, which in a lot of ways is very different, but as it's coming along, I mean, I've now written about the first third, and I'm very clear on what happens in the first half. The second half is much more vague, but that's okay. I will get there. That's okay. But it's very me, and so it's very different, but it's still very me. So again, it just happens. This is not always the case, but I have again got 2 young women protagonists. It's set in Perth. It's set beachside suburb in Perth, and it is a serial killer thriller. And I didn't, and in a way, it's actually what I was planning to. It is actually kind of what I was planning to write when I went on the UEA course, although it's now totally changed. I won't say what the title is because that might change, but it is once again about 2 young women who are trying to kind of fight back in some way and find their agency. In this case, at a time when their suburb has been stalked by this serial killer for the last 18 months, and they end up, both for very different reasons. They do vaguely know each other at the start of the book, but they do this crazy thing, and it took me a long time to find for each of them enough of a kind of devastating backstory for them to do this crazy thing, which is the police investigation has stalled. There's a prime suspect, there's no evidence, and these 2 young women abduct and imprison this man who is the prime suspect in the police investigation. And I'm now finally writing the scenes with them and this guy, and I'm really scaring myself at times, which is quite exciting, really. And this all, the reason I'm writing this is because we had, when I was growing up, in fact, because I lived in Perth, until between the ages of 9 and to my mid-20s, and we had this serial killer in Perth, in the suburbs where I grew up, the Claremont serial killer, who they didn't catch for like 20-something years. So although my story is totally fictional, there's nothing, but it is very much based on the atmosphere of the time and how I was really haunted. All of us were, like me and my friends and my sisters, we were the same age as those girls that were murdered. And I think because it took them such a long time to find the perpetrator, it's really stayed with, people. So, you can talk, Perth is a kind of small city. most people have some recollection of that time or being affected in some way. It's one of those small communities. It's almost like everyone knows someone who knows the families, or so yeah. So it feels quite yeah, I'm amazed that all of this time later I seem to be able to go feel the atmosphere of that in a certain way. Anyway, so we'll see. Hopefully it will become a book.
Mm-hmm. Right, so I'm going to ask you some of the on-stream questions. Michelle Mackenzie has said, you can answer this one really quickly by holding up your books. So she said, oh, the books you're talking about, works in progress or finished books. So just show off your finished books.
There they are.
Okay, see. Sarah Blackburn wants to know how you keep track of your characters and plots.
Ooh, that's a good one. So I like to think, because I'm quite organized in my day-to-day life, so I like to think I'm very organized in my writing, and I'm not really. I kind of start off with what I would really love to do with a novel is just really comprehensively plot the whole thing before I start writing, and I don't. I start off and I always know what the beginning is, and I know what the ending will be. Those things seem to be they come quite quickly. It's all the stuff in the middle of getting them there. And I've also learned from having a book published and having now gone through the editing for the second book that I drop things all the time. I kind of get things, I just things that seem to me to be consistent. My editor is going, no, but you said, and you said this street name, and you've said that's in Lambeth, and it isn't in Lambeth. And so it's I try to plot it all out, but I don't tend to be 100% successful at that, because it goes off in directions. And my husband is really good. We walk the dogs we have 2 dogs, and we walk them every day for about an hour and a half. And I'll just kind of kick things around with him, and he'll go, oh, I tell you, this would be sort of interesting if that happened. And then I'll think, oh yeah, that's great. And now I've got to change everything. But, now I've got this, he's, thrown out this really interesting idea. So I try to keep track of them, but the novel tends to evolve at its own pace, and then sometimes you just get a slow middle, and you think, right, I need to scrap what I'm doing because it's boring me, so it's not going to interest a reader, and you think I need to kind of up the peril here. And my tutor on the MA in my first year used to say, if in doubt, kill someone. So sometimes that's what you have to do, but it's I like to think I'm highly organized and systematic, and I'm really not, I have to confess.
You probably are more than you think you are. I'm kind of similar. The beginning is always the best part, and yes, I do always have a sense of how it will end, or certainly how it will feel at the end, even if I don't know exactly what happens at the end. And then I do plot the thing. I will try and plot the whole thing out, and I can't always do it all in one go, but then it will constantly change, because the characters will do things I don't expect, or I will realise it's not in character for them to do a certain thing, and then I will be stuck for a while I figure out what they would actually do. Character always comes first for me. It's got to feel like actions have got to be in character, and as long as I trust that, I'm kind of pretty confident I'm going to be fine. I had for No Country for Girls, I had this horrible document, which was like this table I made called Who Knows What When, and it had all the characters and this timeline, because I had these 2 characters in the Ute, but I also had a point of view, which is Charlie's sister Gina, and she is telling part of the story, because I realised quite early on that there were lots of things that were happening outside of the Ute, outside of the car journey. So how was I going to make those things known? to the reader. So I had this horrible table, this document, which was just, and I used to go through it and change things, and it completely scrambled my brain. And when I got the book deal, I remember saying to my editor before we had done any edits, do you want to see this document? And when he said no, and I realized I was never going to have to look at it ever again, I was so happy. Oh my God, that was one of the best moments. Yeah.
But that is true, that thing about credibility, because I have these ideas and I think, oh, that makes such a good scene. That'd be really kind of weird or quirky, or I could, that thing is writing itself. And then I have to think, but Minnie wouldn't do that,
yes,
or Albert wouldn't do that, and it has to be. I mean, obviously we're writing fiction about things that are, are stretching the limits in all cases, but it has to feel like within that world and the knowledge we have of those characters, would they do those things? And if they wouldn't, then the whole thing about killing your darlings, that's sometimes what you have to do, because you think, no, that just wouldn't happen. And no matter how excited you are about a scene, you have to sometimes go, no, that's got to go. It's a lovely idea, but it can't work, because these characters wouldn't do those things.
Yeah, you've got to be true to the world. You're right. True to the world you have made.
Before we go on to the other questions, what I liked in both of your books is there's little elements of humour throughout. So although you've got quite dark things, like I laughed out loud at some of the bits with there's like a monkey, isn't there, in your book?
Oh yeah.
Moments.
Oh, that's right. I've forgotten about that.
Oh, and monkey features quite significantly in book 2. So if you liked him in book 1, you're going to like him even more.
Right.
But it's just those little, like, they alleviate the kind of darkness a bit, don't they? And I think they're really important in crime fiction, and they come across in both of yours quite naturally. Is that quite hard to achieve, do you think?
I'm really glad you said that, because humour is so subjective, isn't it? And you're never sure if humour is going to work. And also, I mean, both our books are very dark. They deal with very dark subject matter. But I do think that if you can make a reader laugh, or even just kind of give a slightly whimsical smile, then when you put your characters in peril, as we do, you care more about them because you've laughed with them, I think. So when I started the MA at UEA, I thought I was going to write this really writerly, terribly serious tome, and it was going to be all very, there's going to be beautiful similes and metaphors and lovely vocabulary. And then I wrote something that had some humour in it that turned out to be chapter 1 of the book. And people were going, yeah, you need to keep the humour in. And I love that about it. And I mean, I'm really glad that you laughed, because then that's job done as far as I'm concerned, if you did find it funny.
Yeah. Yes, I absolutely found it funny. And you're right. Then I think it's a lovely way to get the reader invested in a character. And I had never tried to write anything funny before, and in a way I felt like I kind of didn't. It was just the character. I feel like I'm not funny, but my characters can be funny if I'm lucky, kind of thing. It felt like a bit of a lucky thing, that I think Charlie is funny. And I know that, as you said, Bridget, humour is very subjective, and I know that some people will not get her humour, and that's really fine. It's honestly fine. I think some people have read it as more of a dark, gritty story, which it totally is, but I love it when people respond to the humour, because and also it's because it's the way these two characters kind of riff off each other that does also make it funny, and I really enjoyed that so much. And some of those scenes were so fun to write. I'm just thinking of the most fun scene that I wrote, but I won't say anything more about that because it's probably a bit spoilery. But it was great. It was honestly, I mean, because I had written several unpublished books before this one, but none of them had been as much fun to write as No Country for Girls. Yeah.
Sarah has asked you, do you have a go-to must-read author straight away? I call them your shut up and take my money authors. You know, the ones that it doesn't matter what they've written. You're not going to read the back of it. You're just going to see their name on the book, and it's going to be in your
I've got two. So one for me is Sarah Waters, whose Victorian crime novels are just astonishing, I think. And she's moved away from the 19th century as her career has progressed. But I think anything she wrote, I would read. And I absolutely love the American writer Anne Patchett, who's probably her best known, but it's not crime. Her best known book is a book called Bel Canto. But she's such a beautiful writer, and she's got a new book coming out in a couple of months' time. And that it's just a no-brainer. I don't, it's like Anne Patchett's written something, right? Okay, I'm going to read that. I love it. And obviously, of course, Emma Stiles, who, can't wait.
That's nice. Okay, well, I will say two. I love Maggie O'Farrell, and I mean, she writes totally different things to what I am writing, but I have learned a lot from her about again how do you get your readers to fall in love with your characters, and I certainly do that with her books. I also really love Tim Winton, who's a West Australian author, who just writes with this incredible sense of place, and those are the first two that came to mind. Neither of them are crime writers, but I love many of the I do read a lot of crime, but those two, and Tim Winton, he's kind of has this reverence for Western Australia, I guess, which comes across in his books.
I think go on. Sorry, Kaz.
I was going to say, while we're on the subject of like your favourite authors and things, what has been your top reads of the year so far?
Wow. A couple of mine are on audio. So I listened to The Last Passenger by Will Dean, which I found it just absolutely fried my brain. I found it so disturbing, so claustrophobic. And I was listening to it thinking, where else can he go with this? And then you look at it and you think, you've got like 7 hours still to go. What's he going to do with that? And then the other one, which I know is getting a lot of attention at the moment, I've really enjoyed Yellowface by Rebecca Kwong. I thought that was, it makes me want to read more. I mean, she's really unusual because apparently with pretty much every book she writes, she goes into a different genre. And I know that book's getting a lot of hype. But I really enjoy, I love audiobooks. I think when they're done well, they're just fantastic. So those two are kind of recent ones I've enjoyed. I'm sure I'm going to think of loads of things after we come off air. But I thought those two were great.
I really want to read Yellowface. I read the first line and I thought, I have to read this book. What an incredible first line. But I haven't read it yet. So mine, what comes to mind is a book by a West Australian author, a Noongar author called Kim Scott, called Taboo, which Kim Scott is like a kind of West Australian treasure, really. And he has twice won the Miles Franklin Award, which is Australia's big literary award. And this book, Taboo, is an incredible book about reconciliation, which is a big theme for me in No Country for Girls. It was one of the reasons I put these two characters together. Nao is Aboriginal, Charlie is white. There are many other differences between them, but I wanted to see what they could do if I threw them together. Kim Scott is a First Nations author. He's writing from that perspective, and this book, Taboo, is about a site of a historic massacre of among our people. And anyway, it's an incredible book, and so that had a huge effect on me, and I really recommend it. I also read a very beautiful crime debut called, I think it's called All That's Left Unsaid by Tracy Lien. And that is about Cabramatta, which is an area of Sydney. It's set at the height of the heroin epidemic in Cabramatta in the Vietnamese community in the 1990s. And that is, so that's a very incredibly strong, beautiful story about this sister trying to investigate the death of her brother when the community seemed to be afraid to look at what actually happened to him when he was murdered. So that I would also recommend. Those are two of my reads of the year so far.
Mine's The Maiden by Kate Foster.
Oh yeah, I haven't read it, but I mean, all of these sound great. I'm just kind of thinking, I need to add to that ever-growing TBR pile. But
yes, absolutely,
there's a lot of good stuff out there.
Oh, we've had a few questions in here. So Laura said she rescued the last copy of Yellowface with the sprayed edges from Derry Waterstones. She felt a bit sorry for it.
I think it's doing okay. I don't think she needs to worry about it.
Emma, I think this one's for you. It said, is the book, I think this might have been about Taboo. It said, is that the book that was a TV drama with Tom Hardy in it?
Oh, no, different one. Sorry. So I think that was called Taboo, but totally different thing. Yes.
And then I'm trying to see I've lost where we were with the questions. I'm just going to go back up and work out where we're at. I know Laura had asked one of our favourite ones, which have you ever acted out scenes to help with the writing process?
Sorry, say that again. I didn't catch it.
Have you ever acted out a scene to help with the writing process?
No,
no,
go ahead, Emma. Go.
No, I kind of have. I mean, I probably not with other people. Like, I haven't asked people to. I don't think I have, but I will choreograph things because I often have. There are a few physical confrontations in this book, and yes, I will. Like in the opening when Daryl is kind of has Charlie pinned against the fridge, I was kind of pinning myself to the fridge and working out what I had to do with my arms in order to get out of that situation. So I will do that kind of thing. But probably no more than that. Don't know. What about you, Bridget?
I'd love to tell you that I dress up in Victorian costume and act the whole thing out, but I don't. But I do very much see it as a very visual thing. So I kind of think if somebody was watching me writing, they would think, what is going on? Because I do sometimes sort of block things. I almost think it's a bit like, not that I've ever been a stage director of anything on the stage, but it's almost like this thing about, okay, who's where and what are they doing, and then how. And I've got some fight scenes. I mean, I've got some boxing scenes, and I knew nothing about boxing before I wrote this book. So it is that thing of, you kind of act it out in your mind, but now I really want to do it in real life. So that might be what I'm going to do next, is just haul in some willing friends and say, here's the scene, we're going to act it out. I love the question. It's great.
Because we get the best answers from it. You would not believe what some of our authors have done.
Really?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. You weed out all the interesting things. When you ask people this one, we've had people who staged fights with each other, people who've tied up people who've tried to hit their better halves over the head with wine bottles to see what would happen. People who buried a shoulder in concrete for a year to see if it would rot or not. It's a great question.
That is a great question. I mean, I guess what I did when I was the first summer that I made it back to Western Australia after the pandemic, because I wasn't able to go there for 3 years, I did do a road trip with a friend of mine in her husband's ute, and it was such a cool ute, but it wasn't the right colour. But anyway, it was quite a small road trip, but anyway, we had a great time, and then we met some friends, and one of our friends is an art teacher, and we'd taken like pictures of us in the ute, and he managed to it wasn't Photoshop, but it was a similar kind of thing. He kind of changed the colour of the ute, and he made it the right metallic green, the same green as the one in the book. So that was that's not quite acting out, but that was a fun little reconstruction of the road trip.
It's interesting though, because I did have to think about things like I've only ever worn a corset once. I was in a play years ago and had to wear this outfit where you were heavily corseted. But there is this thing about how women could move, and they couldn't turn in the way that we do. If you wanted to turn, you had to kind of move your whole body around. So there were times in the book where I had to think, yeah, Minnie can't do that. She can't move in that way. She's got to sort of think about that she's restricted. And she does, certainly in book 2 and in book 3, she thinks about how nice it would be not to be in a corset, because it was incredibly restrictive, I think, for women. But no, but now definitely that's what I'm going to do from now. I'm going to act everything out in costume.
We have an incredible author in the group called T.G. Campbell, and she writes a Victorian crime series with like a revolving kind of detective agency almost. They're called the Bow Street Society, and the characters change who investigate the crime. And she often does her author dress in like a Victorian dress.
Oh wow,
cool!
Well, you made me think of it when you said I didn't wear the costume. I was like, went back to when I'd interviewed her, and she came on with her full.
Wow, I'm impressed. That is dedication.
Yes, I think so. But it's definitely, I guess, the joy of doing one set back in time is that you can dress up if you wanted to.
Yeah, you can, definitely. And just think about, women's clothing in particular was horrendously restrictive, I think. But yeah, you could definitely do it. Maybe I'll have a themed launch with book 2 or maybe book 3, and everyone's got to come dressed as a character from the novel.
Do it. People love to dress up.
They do.
If you give people an option, they will always dress up. Michelle Mackenzie has said, how long have you all been writing, and how did you come up with your story ideas?
I have been writing. I mean, I wrote. I've kind of always written stuff, but I never tried. I didn't get the idea to start writing a novel until 2008, which is still 15 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that point, I thought that's this thing I've got to do is write a novel. And then I spent, I spent the next 14 years writing novels and not getting them published. And really this story idea only came about because those characters appeared to me. And I think for years before that, I had been just at the back of my mind was this idea to write the Thelma and Louise style story, because that movie had had such a big effect on me. And one of the reasons, because it's actually most recently been re-released, it was briefly in cinemas. They did a restoration of it, and it was so amazing to see it on the big screen again. And one of the things about those two characters was I had never seen women be funny like those two are funny in that film, and I'd never seen them have such agency and fight back in the ways that they did. It was such a game changer, that movie. So I think for years I had it in my mind that I would love to do that, but it was only when Charlie and Nao appeared, these two characters, that I knew I knew almost right away that they were the right ones for that idea. That they had, I knew that they could sustain a whole novel, that they had enough going on that they could do that.
Yeah, I wrote very sporadically, partly because I had imposter syndrome and I didn't think I could do it. And I was also, like lots of people, working full time, and I didn't have a lot of headspace left. And then I did an online writing course in 2016 called the 6-month novel, where it was basically what it says on the tin. You plotted for a month, you wrote for 4 months, and then you edited for a month. And I wrote a novel on the number 13 bus going to and from work, where I was teaching full time. And I kind of did it almost to think, I probably don't have a novel in me, and then I'll know, and I've committed to this and I've spent some money on it, so now I'll know and I can put that thing to bed. And I discovered I really liked it. And the novel was not great. It was lots of chapters that were just two-handed dialogue and nobody did anything. But I did manage to write 80,000 words. And that made me think, I think I would like to write a novel. And then I saw the course at UEA and thought, this is perfect because you study crime fiction and you write your own book. But when I started, I was going to write a book based on a real life case from the 19th century. This woman, Adelaide Bartlett, who was the first person to be charged with murdering somebody with chloroform. And I thought, that's what I'm going to write about. I'm going to take that case and fictionalize it and do something with it. But then I realized quite early on I wanted to write a series. And I thought, if I'm writing a series, I need to focus on the detectives really rather than the villains. And then it kind of came out of that. And I thought, I want a woman at the heart of it. But I thought, if she's a working class woman, with the best will in the world, it's Victorian London. She can't go everywhere. She can't do everything. So I thought she needs a man because of the time when I was writing it. And she probably needs quite an upper class man. And then it just kind of emerged from that. And once I kind of had the two of them, it sort of took off. But it isn't at all the book I thought I was going to be writing. I'm really grateful that those characters found me, because that is how it feels. And like you're saying, Emma, with Charlie and Nao, as soon as those characters kind of burst onto the page, you're like, okay, yeah. And it is that's a really good point about, have you got characters who can sustain a novel? And I'm going to keep your interest as well, because you spend an awful lot of time with them, and if they're not holding your attention, then it's not going to work. So we have been blessed with our characters, I think.
Yeah,
you have, but you've also turned them both of you have turned them into excellent reads.
Thank you.
But there was a question about your characters further up. I think it was Laura Hamilton had asked you which ones you take out for a meal or a drink.
Ooh. I take out Minnie and I take out Tansy. So Tansy is the owner of the Variety Palace music hall. And he's a slightly divisive character, because some people have said to me, he's very successful with women, not with Minnie. And some people have said, I don't get this Tansy thing, but I've got an enormous fondness for him. He's politically incorrect and he's very mean. So you'd probably have to buy your own drinks, and very outspoken, but he has a really good heart at the core of it. So I think it'd probably be Minnie and Tansy I'd take out for a drink.
I think I would want to take Nao and Charlie out together somehow. I can't quite. I mean, yeah, fine. I could see, I could have a meal or a drink with one or the other of them, but I honestly don't think that would not be the same experience unless they were together. I think somehow the energy of the two of them together, that would be an interesting evening. I do feel their kind of presence quite often, and the publication process, as I'm sure Bridget will know, and it's such a roller coaster, you know, the whole book thing, and the kind of that you don't know if people are going to like your book or buy your book, and so many things that can go really right or really wrong. And so there have been many, many times when I have kind of, I've brought those characters to mind as for moral support, which seems kind of crazy, but they,
but I think that is
really, they've kind of looked after me in a way.
That's really true, because it is, you know, getting a publication deal, certainly for me, took quite a long time. And then when you get a deal, it is quite a surreal experience. It's amazing, but it's also quite surreal. And I found the thing that grounded me was going back to them and just spending time with them. And it's like, and it sounds sort of like, you know, they're figments of your imagination, but they do sort of, I'm just happiest when I'm, you know, sat with them, rather than dealing with the publishing world, which is this kind of complex, slightly crazy world where you're thinking, I don't really know what's happening. Are people liking it? Are they not liking it? Is it selling? Is it not selling? Whereas I think the best thing, and it's the advice I'd give to anyone, is just, you know, go back to your writing. That's where the sanity lies, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Totally.
Well, we've got 7 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you a couple of the quick ones. We're going back to another one by Laura. She's got loads of good questions.
Good.
So if your books were adapted for TV or film, would you do a cameo like Jane Harper and Harlan Coben?
No.
Oh, Bridget, I'm very disappointed. All of that, you know, like, yes, you're going to get dressed up. Anyway, okay, well, I'm a little bit disappointed about that. I'm not sure. I might. Interestingly, I've got many West Australian friends who are all like, Emma, we want to be in the movie. So I might have to, you know, cameos might happen with other people instead of me. But yes, possibly have to be the right situation.
Good question. It was, wasn't it? Michelle Mackenzie has also asked, and I think this is good for anyone who's watching who writes, how do you motivate yourself to write on the days words are hard?
I tell myself that nobody looks at the horrible stuff that I write in the early. I mean, I write, it's just awful what I write early on. And I put lots of things in capitals where I think I've got to go back and sort that out. And I just think nobody looks at this. You'll go back later and you'll make it prettier and you'll make it work a bit more. And I think that is sometimes that might be the problem, is that you're thinking, I have to write something, you know, that's publishable straight off, and you don't. You just often I'm literally just placing characters in a room and thinking, okay, where do they move to? What do they do? What does the reader need to know by the end of this? And it's nasty stuff, you know. It's like it isn't pretty at all. But then I go back to it and I think, okay, right, I've got them there. That's okay. And then you go back and you just trim stuff out and you add things. But that's my way of doing it. I just think no one is looking at this early work, so it doesn't matter.
Yes, I do that too. One of the things that really helps me is I always try to start a new scene. So when I write, I'll try and finish a scene and start the next scene. So the next day I'm never faced with the totally blank page. I've got the beginning of something that has then been ticking around in my head since I finished the day before. And one thing that really helps me is to get my characters talking on the page. So if I can get the characters talking, sometimes I'll just write down the dialogue, and that will get me, once I'm in the characters, like Bridget has talked about, then the words will come much easier. And so sometimes to get that, if I'm not feeling it, because sometimes you're not feeling it, I just get a bit of a conversation going between them, and then the rest can kind of build out from there.
Yeah, sometimes just cut straight, because I love writing dialogue, so sometimes just cut straight to dialogue, and then you can figure out, how am I going to get these characters in this room together, and how am I going to get them out of that room. But yeah, I mean, and don't feel you have to write consecutively. Sometimes I've got a scene I'm really looking forward to writing, and I just don't feel like writing anything else, so I think I'll just write a bit of that, and it's there then later on when you need it.
All good advice. We've got 3 minutes left, so remind people what they're going to go and buy after listening to you two talk.
Emma.
This is No Country for Girls, described as Thelma and Louise Meets the Tourist. And this was the book my publishers made me. That was the hardback cover, which is a little different. Bridget?
And this is The Tumbling Girl. And my favourite quote is the one that they put on the front, which is a wry, warm and proper rib-tickling slice of dirty Victorian Gothic, which I think sums it up pretty well. There's a beautiful quote as well from one Emma Stiles on the back. But yes, so Victorian crime, it's, you know, I hope it's a real page turner. And I have had some people say recently that they're not fans of historical fiction, but this has kind of slightly changed their mind. So just give it a go. That's
lovely. Definitely give it a go. It's a great story, brilliant plotting, absolutely so charismatic, funny, definitely page turning.
Great.
Well, that's page turning. Reads.
They are.
You can't go wrong with either of them. So definitely worth it. And we're going to go and we'll finish off. We'll say thanks and we'll go away and choose some winners for some books.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for coming on, and thank you for the totally brilliant questions, and thank you, Kaz, for chatting, and Bridget, it's been really great. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me on. It's been a real joy, and thank you everyone who's listened in and has asked some great questions.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you both.
Thanks, Kaz.